Good evening, y'all. This is James Patton with Magnus Estates in Tullahoma, Tennessee, and I've got for you a story of a very special pig, Imperial Winnie, the 1000th name registered in the A.M.B.A. herd book. As it happens, it's a pretty good story, and so go ahead and pour yourself a whiskey or whatever you drink wherever you're from, which, now that I think about it, upon reflection, may very well be Tennessee whiskey. Early one morning this past May, my farmhand called me while I was in the shower. Now, since it was oddly early to be hearing from him, and since he was by this time fully accustomed to my eccentricities, I sidled out of the stream and answered the phone as the water pelted down next to me. He said, "We've got piglets." I said, "Awesome. How many and how many made it?" Now, for the benefit of anybody who's not part of our world, pigs, and especially Meishan pigs, have a lot of babies, and it's extremely common to lose one or two, either as stillbirths or because the sow steps or lays on one of them, especially if it's her first go and she's not accustomed to keeping track of all those babies, as was the case here. Honestly, if you go back about 150 years, this is an infant mortality rate that utterly dunks on humans for the vast majority of our species history. But regardless, it is a barnyard reality, and I wanted to know how well we'd done. So he told me he thought he'd counted 12, with 2 dead, and one that, well, he sighed and he said, "Yeah, boss, I don't think she's going to make it. She tries to get up to walk with her back end, just doesn't move." I said, "Wait, so the head and the front legs are fine?" He said, "Yeah, it's just the back end." Bore or guilt, because I'd been completely screwed on my ratios on my previous litter. And he said guilt, and I cussed to myself silently. So I said, "Did you try to put her on a teat? Does she have a suckle reflex?" "Oh yeah, I did that. She nurses just fine, but she's just not going to make it." And so I blinked and thought furiously for a second. Fortunately, I was still in the shower, which, as we all know, is among the best places to have thoughts. And I called my wife into the bathroom, since she's an M.D. and frequently has really good input on biological matters, and is moreover the yin to my yang and frequently instrumental to some of my best thinking. And after a brief conference in scrubs and my birthday suit, I picked the phone back up and said, "Okay, no, do not give up on that guilt yet. Pigs are mammals, and milk has stem cells in it, and stem cells are known to pass the blood-brain barrier and repair neurological damage." It's like straight science fiction, and it is. I said, "I want you to alternate between putting her on a teat to nurse and then pull her off and rub her vigorously. And when you take her off, give her Powerade. Laura swears by that stuff. And I want you talking to her. Talk to her, cuddle, love on her. We want her to know that the world is a good place, that she's wanted here, and that it is worth sticking around." Then I hung up the phone and yelled a request to my wife to finish making the coffee that I'd started when I jumped in the shower. 10 minutes later, I get to my pig pen with a half a mug of coffee and one hand, and in the other hand, I've got a syringe of B vitamins. My farmhand was sort of squatted down by the sow and all the nursing piglets, sort of just petting one of the piglets like it was a baby that was going to die or something. I mean, like he meant well, but I sighed out my exasperation, chugged my coffee, and set down my empty mug, and I dropped the syringe into it to keep it out of the pig muck. I was like, "No, dude, here, look." And I grabbed the piglet, and I gave her an Eskimo kiss. And I started talking to her animatedly about how happy we were that she was here. And then I pressed her to my chest and started demonstrating the core concept of vigor in an agricultural context, rubbing her like a hypothermia patient that was going to live. And then I knelt down, grabbed my syringe, uncapped it with my teeth, and gave her a shot of B vitamins before putting her back on her mom to nurse more. I hadn't got the picture now, so I left him to it while I called my vet. I had to leave a message because, vets are busy. So we all took turns, my wife, my hand, me, for several hours, just nursing, Powerade, vigorous rubs and lots of cuddles, just lather, rinse, repeat. We got some hind leg twitches here and there, which was more than we had earlier, but no real momentum. So we had reason not to give up, but we clearly weren't out of the woods yet. Finally, after we'd been doing this for several hours, late in the afternoon, Dr. Smith called me back. Now, Doc Smith is one of those old codger country vets that's probably forgotten more about veterinary medicine than most people will ever know. Just an absolute gold mine of information. But the problem is that sometimes getting the right bit of information out of him requires knowing the exact right question to ask, and I am just not the smartest or most experienced farmer in the A.M.B.A, let alone generally. So rather than play to my weaknesses and try to suss out what the exact right question was, my strategy with Doc Smith is to play to my strengths and just rattle off as much half-baked nonsense as quick as I can manage and learn as much as I can from his corrections when he gently smacks me down. So we talked for a bit, and after we had established that I'd covered the usual bases, I said, hey, so I've been trying out those ice bath cold plunges, like Joe Rogan and that crazy Dutch guy, Wim Hof. So I was thinking I might just dunk her back into an ice bath to sort of like shock the system and try to stimulate more circulation back there and then warm her up again. And Doc Smith was appalled, but he did a great job of concealing it. He's like, oh, I wouldn't do that. And so I just blundered forward in my towering ignorance. I was like, oh, well, what would you do? And he said, well, sometimes a baby animal's body gets confused, and they don't really realize that they've been born yet. So you might get a hot, wet towel and wrap her up in it for 5 or 10 minutes, then take it off and see if it helps. And I was like, so swaddle her snugly in a towel the temperature of a pig's uterus, as if she were still inside, and then whip it off, and it just reboots the nervous system? He said, sometimes, yeah. And, I mean, it's worth a try. So we grabbed a towel and a bowl of water that we clocked at 102 degrees and followed the vet's instructions. This time, we laid Winnie down to nurse, and after she'd filled up a little bit, she stood up and stumbled before she fell over. And this was the best thing we'd seen all day. So we redoubled our efforts. We gave her another shot of B vitamins, and her efforts at walking got more and more effective. The next day, she was stumbling around on her own steam, and 2 days later, we couldn't tell that she'd ever had any sort of problem. So that's the story of Pig 1000. And I think this all worked out very fortuitously, because I think the story of Winnie is a bit like the story of all Meishans. So the way I see it, Winnie comes from great bloodlines. Her mom, Empress Lou, is from Winnie Palmer's stellar program at Imperial Meishans in Bartow, Georgia. And her dad is none other than God's Blessing John, who's an F1 boar from one of the very first crosses of the USDA and University of Illinois research herds that Rico did back in the long, long ago at the founding of the preservation herd that is now maintained by our grand dame of all things Meishan, Laura Jensen. Similarly, the Meishan as a whole has an illustrious heritage, having been painstakingly bred by the Chinese for 5 or 6 millennia. The oldest pictogram for the Chinese word for home is a pig with a roof over it, and this etymology can be seen in the modern character as well. The Chinese cared about their pigs a very great deal for a very long time, until, of course, they didn't anymore. As we all know, our breed is critically endangered, and the large subtype Meishan is now extinct. It's been through some harrowing experiences that seemed to leave it half dead. Birth is also always a harrowing experience, and Winnie's birth also left her half dead. But the good news is that doesn't have to be the end of the story. We said no to giving up. We said no to death. We begged Winnie's back end to remember that it was alive. And now Winnie is looking forward to a happily ever after as one of the foundation sows at Storybook Farms in Greenville, Tennessee. We all have good pigs with incomparable pigness within them. Through our work, our love, and our stubborn refusal to allow these genetic marvels to pass from the earth, we are helping them remember the greatness within their bloodlines and sharing this very special breed with the world. So, a toast to you, your pigs, and Pig 1000, Imperial Winnie of Storybook Farms. May we all write our own happily ever afters. A happy new year to all. Good night.
Look how good she's going. I'm so proud of you, baby. Look at you go. She's trying so hard. Oh my gosh. Look at her go. Look at her go. She's still a little weak, but she's doing so much better.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Look at her go. Look at her go. And she was like fighting her brother for a teat. It was so funny. Like, I'm positive, I think that's, like, I'm pretty sure it's her. Yeah, that's her. Look at that. Look at that. Look at how fast she's moving, huh? Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, look at her go. Oh, I'm so proud of her. Look at that. She's still a little wobbly, but she's going. She's going.